Hey there, I'm not wearing any makeup. Sorry to scare everyone, but it's just a video. So anyway, so we have reached 2.0 around here. The neighbors a couple of blocks over that I met a few years ago knocked on my door tonight to let me know that my mother has been roaming the neighborhoods, knocking on all the doors, trying to get somebody to fix her phone so that she can run away with Elon Musk. So, hey, I have witnesses. uh, anyway, so we took care of that. And so on, you know, everything escalates, doesn't it? Hey, it's a full moon. Uranus is going crazy. Uranus. And so that's always chaos. If you follow astrology, if you don't, still chaos. You just don't know it. But so yeah. So anyway, and then the rusty posts, because when things get really bad, you call your dad, right? So um, so I make these videos just and these posts just um, because there's a lot of air that needs to be cleared, and there's a lot of miscommunication with you know, family and friends and what have you, and misconceptions and stuff. So, everything's on the table. You may love me, you may hate me, you may agree with me, you may not, but it is what it is. So I am who I am. So, this has always been contentious. It's just, and it has not always been, but since the divorce, it has always been contentious. And it's a sad, sad thing. So we always had, I think, a really good relationship. Except he was gone a lot. He stayed out of town a lot, which I kind of understand now. He had the ability to do that with his job, so he did. But I think our relationship was always really good. He was always the popular dad in the neighborhood. He gathered up all the kids, and he'd take 26 kids in the back of his pickup truck to get ice cream, and you know I don't think anything was ever really bad, until we moved to Lubbock, and there was instantly an affair with the next door neighbor and the divorce. So I mean, it's been bad ever since. But a lot of that is sort of the territorial nature of who he married. And I know this is really common, just because I've been in boutiques for years, and so there's always divorced women, and they usually, not always, but a lot of times I have women say, hey, I've got a new relationship. I want all of his kids out of it. I just want it to be me and my kids. And so that's the situation I grew up in. And you never really get over it. And I think also, being an only child, I had no other family, so it hit me, really, maybe harder than it would have if I'd had siblings or something else. But so the situation that is so strange with this, though, is just the control she seems to have over him, not just her, but her family. And so the situation in the last few years, and it always comes up, oh, Angie, and Angie's a bum and she asked for money and all this stuff. Okay, I have literally gone 14 years at a time and not had any contact with him, with these people at all. So that's just not true. And anybody who lives around us and knows the situation knows the difference is enormous. So I literally, I graduated high school in 1988. So didn't have contact with him for a few years. 1993, I was living in Oklahoma, and he came and spent $100 on groceries and bought me a pair of tennis shoes for Christmas. So, and I mean, that was the only Christmas gift in years, or birthday, or anything else. So, and then, and we've had a really, contentious relationship at times. Didn't see him again for, let's see, when would it have been? I think I was leaving California in 2008. So like it was 93 to 2008. What's that, 14, 15 years? Um, and Bonnie had called him. I did not. I think he actually found my number and called me in LA, and I wouldn't talk to him. And so she talked to him, and she started talking to him at times. And when we decided to move back inland, she asked him to help, buy us a car, because we'd been in Los Angeles without a car for years because we didn't need one. And he bought me an old car at auction. It was a 1997 or 8 Chevy Malibu that was full of dirt. It had been out at, on a lot somewhere with the windows out of it. And the whole back seat was covered in blood. And he probably paid 500 or $1,000 for it. And I was very grateful and drove that car for a couple of years. And and he did pay for that. And I had told him then, I said, I'll get along with you as long as I can get along with you. But, when you start getting ugly with me, I'm not going to get along with you anymore. And that was kind of how, how we proceeded. And, it always devolves. And so we have different stories on how it devolves, though, because the story that's told and the story that kind of goes around is, oh, Angie just always wants money, and Angie just always wants blah, 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 blah. I didn't ask for anything else. I don't believe, and I didn't live around him. So Judy's little books that she keeps where, she spent $1.14 on a baked potato for me in 1983 and that kind of stuff. There was no reason for it. I wasn't around. So there were no birthday presents, no Christmas presents. I mean, I don't think I was, a debt to them at all after that. And I don't think I saw them again. I know I didn't until about 9 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, when we first moved back here. And we'd bought a van in South Dakota because that's where we'd been living, and we came to Texas in that van, and it was an old van. We paid $1,200 for it off of a lot, drove it off the lot, and the wheel cover went flying across 4 lanes of the interstate. Had paper thin tires. It was kind of a mess, but by the time we got to Texas, it had new tires and new all kinds of stuff. We put a ton of stuff in it. So but we got to a little town outside of Amarillo that is very near Judy's hometown. So a lot of people out there know them. There's a lot of gossip out there. I don't sell out there anymore because there's like all this gossip that, you hear all these snarky whispers and you're like, yeah, I'll go down another highway. Who cares? So, there's an old biddy committee in every town. What can you say? And so, but anyway, so we weren't living in Texas. We just kind of come through selling jewelry, and the van, we sold jewelry one night to a store who I know there's a personal connection to them. And somehow that night, and it was real late on this, rural highway, the van just died. And so we had to call a tow truck. And the whole situation was kind of shady. I've always been kind of suspicious of, how that all evolved, if the van really had a problem, or if, there was some sabotage. There's definitely some sabotage with a creepy tow truck driver, and then the dealership that we were sent to get it fixed. And that's a long story, but like the whole situation was creepy and weird. So it could have been they were a trafficking gang and we just kind of got caught in a bad situation. Or it could be that they knew who we were, which I'm sure they did, because small towns gossip, and they just kind of held us captive until I was forced to call my dad. I kind of think that's probably more the scenario, but whatever, it is, events evolved as they did. And basically the dealership told us that the van was not legal to drive. We couldn't leave and we would have to have it towed. And so I had to call my dad and say, hey, can you tow us from Vernon to Lubbock? Because, there's a problem. And of course, he does what he always does. And I don't really know why he does it. I think it's a cultural thing. I think maybe the Church of Christ people and the Baptists and the men in this part of the world would say, oh yeah, that makes all kinds of sense. That's how I do it, because, I think it's a cultural thing. And, I think it's a very kind of tacky, trashy, stupid way to act. But it's, perhaps maybe it is just how all the men here would treat women in their life. I don't know. We really don't. I think it's just crazy. But But anyway, instead of, somebody just, me being able to call on my dad doing me a favor, since he owns a bunch of trucks and trailers and he could just, possibly drive a couple of hours and come tow me, it turned into a huge family saga, which it always does. And it's a weird, bizarre thing. So Judy has 2 kids, Paige and Craig. Paige is 6 months younger than me. Craig is 7 years younger than me. So when I was 12, he was 5. And he was like my best buddy at that age. And haven't seen him in years. So, and I'm good with that. I don't care to see any of them. But, and Paige and I always had a contentious relationship. But I think a lot of it, we were in the same situation with our parents had imploded our lives at a very critical age. And, also we were really pitted against each other for the purpose of the adults wanting attention. And so I think I think we would have, if our relationship had naturally evolved, we probably would have become friends. But when you're pitted in a situation, because adults want attention, it just it doesn't go well, and it never did. So anyway. And then Paige married Joe, who I call the plucky little Mexican. I don't like him. I just think he's really cocky and ignorant. But then again, maybe it's just the culture. But he apparently runs Rusty's Way, the office or business or whatever. I don't really know. I have not been involved in it since I was like 11. I was involved in Rusty's Way when I was 11 years old, and my mother was naming the company because she said Rusty always gets his way. And like when they bought the first test truck and got the loan, and then they immediately got a divorce, and that was all tied up in the divorce. So I have no history with it beyond that. And so. But the weird thing is, so like when we're stranded in Vernon, and I asked him to come tow me, and he said he would, but it doesn't happen that way. Like you would think you could just call your dad and say like, hey, I've got a problem, and you have a bunch of trucks and a bunch of trailers, and you live out here anyway. Would it be like too big of a deal for you to come tow me? Which it shouldn't be. I wouldn't think. I mean, if I was in that situation, I'd say, sure, I'll come tow you. Any Facebook friend, sure, I'll come tow you. I don't even know if I know you, but it's never that. What it always is a committee meeting with the entire family. So these people have no relationship with, and what little relationship I do have with them is terrible. I don't like them. They don't like me, So it's not good. But the stories that like I'm constantly asking for money and taking advantage of the situation is absolutely 1000% untrue, and always has been. Just does not happen. The vast difference in how we have been treated over the years is like, I'm a pauper who lives in the gutter, and they live in houses with 8 garages and have 49 campers and trailers and race cars and kids and families and college. I mean, we are not even sort of the same. I doubt they have ever had a day that they had to eat beans and rice because they couldn't afford dinner. So I mean, we are not anywhere near the same. So so you would think there would be a lot more hatred here than there is, although I will say there's plenty, but this is not why. Well, maybe it's a little why, but it's not all of why. But so I call and I say, hey, can you help me with the tow? Well, first of all, it starts at a morning phone call, probably 8 in the morning, after I've already spent the night in this town and been through this for a day and a half anyway. And then I get baited and harassed on the phone all day long, and I get cursed out all day long, and I get called a fat and a loser and trash and a gutter snipe and all of these horrible things, when I just really have a serious problem and really need a favor from my dad. And so in the middle of these angry, hateful, just virulent phone calls back and forth, and of course I'm crying and in tears, and you can hear me now. I mean, this is like how many years later, and like it still hurts my feelings, but I try to bury it. So, and I'm braced for it now because I've had a lifetime of it. And so then it has to go through the committee, So Judy has to pipe up and be able to call me all of these ugly things she wants to say. Now, I will say, I do call her the Wiener Eater of 63rd Street because the kids on the block gave her that nickname for a reason when we were all 11 years old and all the parents were doing whatever they were doing, getting divorces. So I didn't give her that nickname. I didn't even know what that meant at that age, but I do now, and it did stick. So, you know, I just get degraded for just being a human, basically, and having just an ordinary human problem that should be a relatively simple fix. And so then when Judy's done and Rusty gets back on, and he's, you know, on it again, because he's got to ramp it up, because he's got to make her look like he's the big man, because this is a cultural thing, maybe. I don't know. In this culture, I think it is. And so, and I just want to say to women and girls growing up in this culture, get the fuck out of here, because like the rest of the world does not operate this way. But if you live in this part of the world, I mean, I've had a lifetime of it, and it's a lot of bullshit. And so if that's not enough, then, and mind you, this is the same person who's been telling everybody in this area, friends, family, people he works with for years, that his wife stole his daughter away, that he's just, you know, victim mentality. Poor, sad, sap father, you know, misses his daughter, really wishes he could see her. No. Not a picture of me in the house. I mean, it calls me every curse word in the book, so, you know, but it gets him attention, so I get it, and it gets Judy attention, and then, you know, and then they harass and bait me together when I'm just having a, you know, a basic human problem, and they get each other attention, and, you know, when they were younger, it was kind of a mating dance, and they would even kind of joke about that. They're in their 80s now, so who knows, but, and so, then, it doesn't end there. Then they have to get in the committee, and the committee is Joe and Paige and Craig. So it's Judy's kids and Judy's son-in-law. Although they say, our kids, Paigey and Craigie baby are our kids. Well, no, Paigey and Craigie baby are Judy's kids with Elton, her first husband, who got run over by the truck and lived for 25 years as a quadriplegic before he died. Very sad situation, but they're not our kids. They're not Rusty's kids. I'm Rusty's only kid. But anyway... So we know who has priority in this situation, but they all have to get their 2 bits in. And so, and Joe, who I really only met once coming through from California. So, I mean, he's no relation to me at all, but, and truly none of them are, but they all have to get their 2 bits in. And so Joe has just a lot of opinions that, you know, that mirror Judy's. That I'm just, you know, terrible white trash. I actually, coming back from California, they actually called me the N-word, which is really interesting, as white as I am, but, you know, yeah, I'll take it as a compliment. Yeah, you know, they are beyond vile to me personally. Now, other people love them, and I remember that because I remember, you know, my dad having a sparkling personality before this, you know, this situation evolved into what it did. And so, you know, Joe has all the rules. He runs the company, he runs the money, he runs the business. I don't think he can add 2 and 2, and he gets really annoyed with me because I know all those big words, and when I'm around, he has to get a thesaurus and a dictionary to understand my emails, which I think is hysterical. He even said one time we got in a big fight online one time years ago. He said, "You know all those big words." So yeah, he needs to read a little. So anyway, so he gets his ignorant 2 bits in, and then you know, Paigey baby and Craigie baby have to weigh in, and apparently they have a lot of jealousy about me, and I can't for the life of me imagine why. Because, you know, I've lived like a vagabond most of my life, and, you know, they were, what, 20 years old in the country club with houses with 8 garages and all this bullshit. So, not that I would want any of that, but, you know, the difference in our lives is like extreme beyond measure. And not because their mother had any money, because when she lived next door to us, they had old motel furniture in their house, like old motel furniture, like, you know, when you buy a couch for $5 at one of the cheap motel furniture stores, And yeah, I mean, she didn't even own a set of dishes. She had paper plates in the cabinet. She probably still does. She used to do dishes and she can't cook, but like, which is just a fact, not an insult. It's just, you know, personality, what she does. So, but like, they had a big upgrade, you know, when Rusty, you know, married into that situation. So a big financial upgrade. So I can't imagine for the life of me why they would be jealous of me. But okay, so whatever. So anyway, it becomes this big, huge committee meeting, and then we go back to all the threats and insults. You know, maybe I'll come get you, maybe I won't. This is the dangling me over the fire. Maybe I'll come get you, maybe I won't. We kind of think you're an asshole and you steal money from us. And no, I'm never taken anything from them. I have a couple of times asked for favors that were minimal, very minimal. Um, and so, and this was one of those times. So anyway, you know, day and a half, 2 days, spent another night in a motel there. So it's a couple of days of getting baited around, you know, just with my life on the line. Would they bring a trailer 2 hours to help me or not? And so finally they did. And of course, Judy was hissy and pissy and huffy the whole way because that's what Judy does. She doesn't like to be around me. And then, of course, Rusty was too because he has to mirror Judy. And of course, Bonnie was with us and everybody hates Bonnie. So, you know, basically, you know, anything to create a bigger fight, a bigger scene. It's like a bigger story that they can get drunk and tell all their friends on the patio because they've been kicked out of all the bars in town. So, whatever. You know, it's all for show. That's all it is. It's just all a bunch of grandstanding for to establish territory, kind of like a cockfight, and also to have something to talk about, and you know, gives them a little bit of fodder for gossip for a while. So anyway, they came and towed my car, my van, and took us to the La Quinta because I had hotel points, so nobody would have to pay for a hotel. And the next day I found a mechanic. Well, you know, of course he's huffing and puffing. It's going to cost him all this money. And Judy was mad because they missed a next door neighbor's funeral. And God forbid I just ruined their whole life because they missed this funeral and, you know, somebody they barely knew. And, you know, I just ruined their whole day. The nerve of me to show up once in 14 years with a problem because it just ruined their whole entire life. They're going to have to just scratch everything and start over. So I got a loan through Square, my credit card processing company that processes credit cards for the jewelry business. And the next day, when we went to go have the car fixed, I paid for it. So I paid for the hotel room on my hotel points. I paid for the car repair with my loan that I paid back within a couple of weeks of sales. And so basically, you know, it took them a couple of hours and a little bit of gas to come and get me. And it was like a big, enormous inconvenience and nightmare. And they never want to see me again. And they hate me. And, you know, they always do this thing where Judy tells us we have to leave town. We're not allowed to be in Lubbock. And then Rusty will drive us to the edge of town to make sure we got out of the highway because Judy can't stand it if we're in Lubbock. So, anyway. So then Rusty says, oh, I'd really love it if you'd live around here and I really miss you and blah, 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 blah. So I rented an apartment in Amarillo. Not because I want to live here, but because truthfully I'm sick of being on the road and I don't really know where the fuck to go and I can't afford to be in California and I don't like any place. So it's cheap here, it's kind of clean here. Crazy as I'll get out, but it's a crazy I understand and, you know, cheap. That's why I'm here. So I rented an apartment in Amarillo. And this was in the beginning of Trump's first term, so year-wise, like 9 years ago, right? So we were there 4 years, and then we were in a hotel in Amarillo for a year and a half through COVID, and then I've been here like another 4.5 years in Lubbock. And so I would call him, and he'd say, I want you to be friendly, I want you to call me. I'd call him, and at that time, he, you know, I could catch him in his pickup driving on the highway or something. We have these quick phone calls, funny, you know, funny, tasteless jokes or just news headlines, you know, we love Trump, whatever. And just really friendly, short phone calls. And he never came. I would invite him, you know, hey, come by the house. I know you have a shop here, you know, come, we'll do lunch. We'll go get an ice cream. Just stop by and say hi. Just, you know, anything. No, can't do it. Can't come to your house. drive there all the time, drive right there all the time, couldn't possibly stop and say hi, I don't have 5 minutes, Judy won't let me, I'm not allowed to, blah, 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 blah. And so, anyway, so a couple of months, we had these phone calls, everything was really friendly, and then suddenly, the phone calls were kind of diverted to when he could sneak out in his barn, or when he could sneak out on the golf course in his golf cart, or when he could sneak away in his pickup, run into the grocery store or the pharmacy or something. But it was kind of made known that I wasn't really supposed to be calling anytime that anyone might be around. So just wait for the phone to ring. So then you get this kind of mistress relationship, which is a lot of the relationship I've had with him over the years, is kind of a mistressy sort of situation, like, got this other thing going, so you're kind of the side piece. So, and I get it, and so, then I just wait for the phone to ring, and, and I get hung up on, and, I get it, and you go through it here with girlfriends too. Like, if you have girlfriends who are married in this part of the world, they're not allowed to use the phone because they're married. They're not allowed to have a phone conversation because they're married. It's move to California, get out of this shit show Baptist mentality. But, some people like it, so whatever. So, so we kind of had that relationship for a while, still very friendly, but very guarded. And then he got caught with that, still wasn't allowed to talk to me. It was a problem on his end. It was a problem with, the committee and Judy, and, he was having trouble managing, his freedom to have a phone conversation with his daughter, and was absolutely not allowed to, be near his daughter. And so then the phone conversations just sort of disappeared. And there's two things. His phone comes through Rusty's way, through the shop, which Joe manages. And Joe has the printout on all of his phone calls. So when the bills started coming in and they were saying the printouts and there were calls to me every day, then he was not allowed to talk to me anymore. So that's why we haven't had any communication on the phone. And so the other side of that is his vehicle is through Rusty's Way, and Joe has GPS on all of the vehicles for Rusty's Way, which in a company like that you would. And so if he drives anywhere near my house, or anywhere, near where I might be living, or anywhere in the vicinity of where I might be, then, he gets caught cheating with his daughter. And so that's a problem. So he can't ever be around me. And so I moved to Lubbock. Same situation's going on, but I'm still trying to get along with him. And truthfully, he's my dad. I've always missed him. And I've always had my feelings really hurt because I miss him. But, excuse me. So I moved to Lubbock, and I live less than a mile from him. For 4.5 years now, less than a mile from him. And I would call him, and I'd say, hey, come by, we'll go get an ice cream. Come by the house, I made a piece of pie. Come by the house, we'll make coffee. And, nope, can't do it. I gotta go play with Aaron's goats. There's just nothing more I want to do than play with Aaron's goats. Who's Aaron? Oh, well, he was Craig's friend when Craig was a little boy. So, the neighbor of the stepson from childhood you would rather spend time with than, 5 minutes with your daughter. So, he's not allowed to talk to me. And, Judy only likes dogs. Judy hates cats, so he hates my cats. And he hates my mother because he's married to her for 20 years. And he hates me because, he didn't want to be in that situation. And there's just hate raining down every minute of every day, all the time, for years and decades. But have I asked him for anything? Have I drained their finances? Have I been an enormous burden? No. Although I do know, because Judy mentions it every few years when I see her, that she's kept a tally of all the child support I owe them back, because she feels that she was built with child support when I was a kid. Although, my dad paid for her kids to go to college, and he paid for them to play on sports teams and cheerleading and things that, you know, I was told there wasn't money to do. And, you know, they had a lot different life than I did. And so, yeah, 1993, $100 worth of groceries and a pair of tennis shoes. When I had actually gotten down to 80 pounds because we were in a really bad situation, literally starving. But that was after I got totally degraded and told that hungry people deserve to starve. So that was the beginning of Bonnie's flashbacks that went on for years. So that was then. And then, let's see, California, the Chevy Malibu. And I mean, you know, it's been, you know, I don't ask for much. I really don't. And they did come to Amarillo one time. Him and Judy both called me up and said, you know, hey, we're coming through town. Do you want to go get a sandwich over at some fast food sandwich place? I don't know. I don't eat that stuff. And really crowded restaurant, lunchtime. It's close to my house. And I cleaned my car for like a day because I know he's neurotic about cars. I'm really not. You know, they're just transportation to me. And I was like, you know, waxing, polishing, vacuuming, just, you know, anything to please him, you know, just to go get a sandwich. And I walk in the sandwich place to meet him at the table. And of course it's crowded with people. And he stood up and this is of course to please Judy, because you got to make a scene to make Judy happy. This is the mating dance. He stands up and just screams and loudly berates me for being too overweight, fat, look like a slob, filthy car, you know, an embarrassment. You're an embarrassment, Giz, you're an embarrassment. So, you know, of course, to the top of his lungs for everybody in the restaurant, you know, can see and hear. And, coming back here has been interesting because I do think there is an element of the culture here where men are just really assholes. They just are. Just culturally, it's like, you know, it's like they've got to be an asshole to prove their manhood. There is an element of it here for sure. But really, it's all just territorial. It's all territorial. This is all rooted in Judy married up for a reason. And she wants her kids to have everything, which they do, and they always have. There's never been any question that I was going to ever inherit anything. I mean, you know, when your own father will call you filthy racial slurs, you know, and won't even be civil, and, you know, once in a decade. And the really sad thing about this, though, is that he seems to be so controlled, because when he has the freedom to just be himself and to just make a phone call or just, you know, just have a couple minutes, he's just a really nice, decent human being, which I think a lot of people, that's the personality they know. And it's the personality I knew as a kid. But he has to always perform like a circus monkey for these people who basically profited from him, you know, more than anyone, which in many ways is really, really sad and crazy. It's really not a whole lot different than the exact same situation my mother has with these online scammers pretending to be Elon Musk. In both cases, these are groups of people who play to the ego, who tell the victims everything they want to hear, and they just play to it, and they profit from it, and it's a really sad thing.